This conference will now be recorded.
Alrighty, hello everybody and welcome to today's meeting of the Equity Advisory Group meeting. By way of introduction, I am going to ask the group if there are any objections to me, Dominic Gotti, Clean Energy Innovator Fellow with the Public Utility Commission, from leading / just mediating this meeting today. Are there any objections? Alrighty. At 12:33. I will be leading this meeting just to make sure we get through the agenda and give some updates on behalf of the PUC. As per usual, we'll be doing our best to use Robert's rules, but I do not want that to interfere with anything that this group wants to do. If there's a parliamentary question, just raise your hand, ask about it. We'll figure through. At this point, I believe everyone is familiar with everyone who's on the call. We have all 10 members of the Equity Advisory Group in attendance today, and that includes Ben Belaski on behalf of the department. The order confirming Ben's permanent replacement of Melissa Bailey on this group went through last week, so Ben is now considered a permanent member on behalf of the department. Alrighty, so our first thing up on the agenda is a review of the agenda. So that was sent out, a draft version was sent out last Thursday, and a final version, or not final, a updated draft version was sent out on Friday evening. Apologies for the lateness of that email, just trying to wrap everything up before the weekend. Just to review, you should have got it in your inbox. It's also posted on the Clean Heat Standard website, puc.vermont.gov/clean-heat-standard. Are there any edits that anyone would like to make, either adding, removing, or rearranging any items? Going once, going twice. Cool. As a extra bit of public opportunity for public comment throughout it, as was agreed at our last meeting, during substantive agenda items where the group is likely to come to a decision and take a formal action. Before any such action is taken, the group will take a moment to solicit public comment. I went ahead and identified 4 items on today's agenda that I think we should do that for. The first is item 6, prioritizing and sequencing of duties. 7, benchmarking systems to evaluate clean heat standard elements. 8, credit ownership consideration. And 9, GREET model. Are there any any other items that members feel like we should open up for public comment before we move on from that agenda item? Alrighty, hearing none and having no amendments to the agenda, without objection, we will consider it approved. Wonderful. Alrighty, next piece up is review of the February 5th meeting minutes. As everyone will likely have noticed, they are substantially shorter than they have in the past. That is due to the advantage of recording these meetings instead of commission staff having to sit here and try our best to accurately capture opinions that were expressed by you guys on complex topics. We instead have a recording of the meeting. The written minutes, we have taken the approach of moving them down to the Vermont Open Meeting Law minimum standard, which is items that were discussed. So basically, we take a look at the agenda, any actions that were made. They use some odd language in the law, but our council has taken it to mean any motion or conducting of business and how it was resolved. So that is what is in the brackets and italics in the minutes. There is a link to the meeting on the Clean Heat Standard website and at the bottom of the minutes. Have people gotten a chance to look at those minutes, even if not watching the recording? And are there any changes anyone believes should be made to the February 5th minutes? Alrighty, hearing none, the presiding officer would look favorably upon a motion to approve the February 5th meeting minutes.
Approve.
Alrighty, is that so moved? I heard from you, Chris. Move to approve. It is 12:38. Alrighty, do we have a second on that motion to approve the February 5th meetings as posted? We got a second from John. Alrighty. Is there any debate on the approval of these minutes? Hearing none. All those in favor, please indicate so by raising your hand on screen or using the raise hand function of GoToMeeting. All opposed? In the opinion of the presiding officers, the chairs have it, or the ayes have it. The February 5th meeting minutes are approved. Voice vote. 12:38. 39. Alrighty. The next item we have is a commission update on CHS work. We've got 5 subtopics in here: recent orders, reports, facilitators, consultants, and technical advisory group. My plan is to briefly walk through each of these 5 and give an opportunity for questions or discussion at the end of each of those. Before we begin, Srini, I see your hands up. Do you have a question before we get this point, or was that just left out? All right, no worries at all. Okay, so first up is recent orders. So the group last met on February 5th. On February 5th, the Commission released an order requesting comments on process for determining annual greenhouse gas emission reduction requirements, which is quite a long order title, but essentially what we're looking at there is we have a point at which we are now, and what now is going to be determined a bit by the department study and where we need to be at benchmarks over up until 2050, and the process by which we find, take in, and digest information and convert that into the rate at which we pace our GHG reductions. So that I believe is actually due today, given the holiday yesterday. So comments are due on that today. We also put out a order amending the schedule in the -INV case, that is 23-2221-INV, and is concerned with default delivery agent matters. So we amended the schedule there after a workshop and a couple of other things we did. And then we also announced the membership changes from the department. And aside from some workshop notices, I believe that is all the recent orders that have gone out in the Clean Heat Standard world. Deirdre, if I'm missing any, please let me know. Does anyone have any questions about any of the recent orders? Mia?
Dominic, I don't know if I'm jumping ahead, but wasn't there also an order on reporting on existing programs for clean heat measures?
Yes, there absolutely was. And thank you for saying that. I need to update a portion of our website. There was basically the question that had been asked to this group: what are the programs that currently exist in Vermont to basically help people with their heating situations? The goal of that order is to take a look at what programs are currently available and what are the qualifications for different programs. This in right now it is helping commission staff understand kind of where all the money is in Vermont and what kind of programs would this program be hopefully aligned with, potentially, competing with. Obviously, competing with other state-funded programs is never our goal, but we're trying to understand that landscape. So there is a spreadsheet attached to that order for everyone's organizations to go in and just put it in a form that hopefully should be easy to fill out and will be easy for us to digest, and eventually take a look at what other incentive or support programs might need to be a part of the Clean Heat Standard for it to be successful. That also does alleviate the need for EAG group members to present their programs to this group. I made a quick note of it in the email, but please do fill out that request for comments, and I am sure we will be coming back to this group to understand what that landscape means for this program. Mia, was there anything else you want to talk about on this subject?
No, I think it's due March 15th, right? And I know a lot of us will be responding to that for programs that are housed at our agencies if we have any.
Wonderful. We did try to give a little bit of a longer timeline on that. We understand that a lot of our requests for comments are relatively short. And so since there is less of a pressing deadline there, we wanted to give groups a little more time.
Actually, Dominic, there was one thing I wanted to mention when I was looking at that. I don't know how we'll plan on dealing with programs that are shared jointly between different agencies. We have some stuff that's kind of in a gray area that my agency is involved with, but not sort of administrating the bulk of the funding. I guess, would it be the department's or the PUC's preference to put it down and just write a comment saying like, I'm not sure where this lies?
Yeah, I appreciate that question. That's a good thing that we didn't have a ton of visibility into, so I'm glad you can identify. If there's an opportunity for your agency or organization and the other organization to collaborate to make sure someone's covering it, that would be our first preference. If you're not going to have time to, have that meeting, just go ahead and note it with whatever information you can provide. And once we get everything in, we'll make a master table. And a little note like that will let us know that if it's not showing up elsewhere, to follow up with whatever relevant organizations there are.
Okay, thanks.
Absolutely. Alrighty. Any other questions, comments, discussion on recent orders? Mia, thank you so much for flagging that. Alrighty. Next piece up is the 2 legislative reports that the commission issued last week. Wow, time does fly. That was the funding sharing reports, which this group has discussed extensively, and you may have noticed that the group's recommendation made it into the funding streams report. We also released the check back report, which was a more comprehensive look at the work that we've done thus far, and what is still on the table for us to accomplish. I don't want to say a ton beyond those reports. I'm happy to answer questions on how to find them and where they will be going, but I would encourage everybody to read those reports. You guys will mostly know what's said in there because you guys have participated in it, which we very much appreciate it. But right now, I want to open the floor for any questions, comments, discussion related to those 2 reports.
I'll comment.
Hearing none.
Oh, no, I'll comment. Yeah, so I don't know where this takes the group, but if for those of us who haven't read didn't have a chance to read the check back report to the legislature, in it, the PUC staff, express a lot of concern, and I guess I would characterize it as doubt that this process will be completed by 2025 as suggested. And I don't know that I have anything that suggestions for direction, but that seems like something our group should maybe talk about amongst ourselves, like what the plan should be if this can't be completed in time. And I understand that Dominic might not have something from the PUC, but I'd like to hear from them, what they'd recommend for the legislature to do, and if it was extended, what they would suggest the extension period would be. It just feels noteworthy and something we should discuss.
Matt? Sorry, we can't hear you, Matt.
You hear me now?
Yes.
Just wanted to say, very well put, Mia. It is noteworthy. It's something that we should discuss because it's something that we may need to, in the future, have a discussion that takes the form of a letter that we sign our name to. If we think that the equity concerns are so great that the speed of which that the clean heat standard is required to be developed by the Public Utility Commission, then we should speak out. I mean, we spoke out informally, and the Public Utility Commission, in their checkback report, noted that to the legislature. But time is running short in terms of what we can possibly do because that time to adjust the legislation before the final report is delivered really is in the month of March, in the beginning of April. So we're kind of in a box just because of the legislative calendar, in that we may decide in July that this is fine. This is the appropriate speed and we can address the equity concerns. Or we may say something differently, but at that point, it'll be too late. The legislature will have gone home and there'll be no opportunity to adjust the statute.
Jeff, go ahead.
This is Jeff from OEO Weatherization. I agree with Matt and Mia, if just to share my opinion.
I guess it would be helpful to know, Dominic, to the extent that it's possible for the PUC to keep us informed, just because, if we really can't complete our work without full access to the, proposed framework for whatever comes out of the tag and the other PUC processes. So I guess just requesting, soon and frequently lots of feedback about what our timeline looks like so we can plan appropriately.
Absolutely. We've done our best to keep this group and the public in general informed of where we are on things. I think the big gap right now is the lack of a dash rule comprehensive schedule, and that is weighing on us as well. We are working on it. We're trying to get that out. We understand that the draft timeline is obviously we are not abiding by it at this point, and there will need to be some consolidation of topics. We are working, of course, with our still relatively new chair on his suggested approach to this. So we will be keeping you guys in updated. We do have a point on the agenda today, prioritizing and sequencing of duties. Strong feelings there will absolutely be noted by commission staff and be reflected to the best of our ability in any scheduling decisions.
So,
Matt?
Dominic, and I don't know who can speak on this, but we do have legislation drafted, not us, but someone, I presume at the PUC, but I don't know, has drafted legislation or encouraged Senator Bray in the Senate Natural Resources Committee. It's S306, and it does make changes to the clean heat standard. My question is sooner or later, the equity advisory group will be asked, and the technical advisory group will be asked, members of the committee will be asked, is this something that we support? And whoever authored it, if it is someone from the PUC, I think both the TAG and the EAG should certainly hear why. It fundamentally changes how we select a default delivery agent by, instead of doing it in June, which is very soon, to 180 days if and when this rule is adopted by the legislature, 100 days
Mhm.
after the fact. That's the proposal. I don't know if I support it. I don't know if the EAG should support it or not support it, but we haven't really, it's going to move quickly through the legislature depending on who wants it. I think the EAG deserves to know who wrote it, why they did it, and the merits of it.
Absolutely understandable that the piece of legislation does exist. My most recent understanding of action on it is it was put on the committee calendar and has not been moved basically out of the committee's holding area. I am not as my knowledge on the Vermont legislative process is not as in depth as I would like it to be to answer this question. I would be happy to talk more about that proposal if this group right now wants to discuss the possible delay in the DDA timeline. And I think I want to leave it there for right now, but absolutely noted. And I will definitely bring it up with the rest of our team. What would be, I don't know, I guess, Matt, I would like to know, do you have any specific questions that you feel need to be answered, or is this more something that the answered by the PUC, or is this something that you think that this group here should discuss and possibly take action on?
Well, the first question is pretty simple, and I think I know the answer, but no one said it in a public forum, which is who wants this? Is it the PUC or is it some other entity? If it's the PUC that drafted it because they want to move this very important piece, advance it to 180 days after the rule if it is adopted, that may make sense. I don't know. I haven't formed a strong opinion either way. I just like to hear the merits of it before it goes before the legislature. And I think we owe it as as selected by the PUC to advise on equity. I think we should understand why the PUC, if they do, and I don't confirm this, wants this legislation and why.
Could I
We
ask
should.
Matt or Dominic or someone who's familiar with this just to give us a quick summary? Because this is the first I'm hearing about a bill that might
Yeah,
change the clean
it,
heat
it
standard.
does two things. S306 does two things. One is it it fixes what may be a Scrivener's error or something that allows the PUC and the tax department to share information confidentially to ensure that the gallons reported by the obligated parties can be verified. That seems simple. The other part, which is the PUC is required to send out an RFP and select a default delivery agent. This is the entity selected by the PUC to receive funds from the obligated parties if they cannot meet their credit obligations by themselves. And to advance that, to get that organization or entity or for-profit conglomerate started in June so they can start this process, S306 says, no, stop that. And we'll only begin that process after, when and if the legislature adopts the rule that is being created now. So in other words, the default delivery agent, the timeline for them getting to work is not June of this year, but 180 days after the legislature, if the legislature adopts the clean heat standard rulemaking procedure. So it's significant from a timing perspective. And for anyone that wants to be a default delivery agent, you either start applying next month or in 45 days, or you get a chance to watch this whole thing play out before you determine whether or not you want to bid to be this default delivery agent.
Thank you.
If this is just because the legislature has packed too much stuff in a short amount of time, and this is the PUC's answer for alleviating some of that pressure, totally understand. But is this not the only thing that should be alleviated in this next calendar year from an equity perspective, because that's what we have. We've been experts selected to deliver that that perspective, and I think if there is an opportunity, if there's a desire by the PUC to make a statutory change to stretch out the obligations that they're under this law for why, number one, and if it's because of equity concerns, is this the only piece that should be delayed until after the rule is adopted because of equity concerns? I don't know these answers. I just know that there is a very short window of opportunity in order to fix the law or change the law, and we have the ability to address that from an equity perspective.
I heard Matt. Mia, I see your hand up.
Yeah, I would just add, in case people didn't see it, because I almost missed it, the Department of Public Service submitted comments to the PUC, adding another sort of layer of confusion onto this, that the law says that one or more than one default delivery agents can be selected, and the department's point was that it would be hard to just say whether it should be one or several until they see who's applied and what services they offer. And then also that it's not clear whether creating multiple agents who do the same thing could create competition, and that could create equity issues. So I do hear Matt's point that there are a lot of issues involved in appointing the default delivery agent, and that has a lot of ramifications for our equity work as well.
To provide some documentation behind these comments for those who may not be tracking this precise piece, in the -INV case 23-22-21-INV, the introduction of legislation is mentioned in the February 12th order amending schedule. It's the first footnote. As to the crunch of the timeline that I think is behind a lot of this conversation, in that order, the track 1 schedule addresses the pieces under this time constraint. Mike?
As someone who's trying to follow what is going on in the clean heat standard, probably more than most residents of Vermont, I still find it hard, given all the documents that are uploaded onto the EPUC website for 220 and 221, to track all these. And anything that's found in just a footnote in one of those documents is all but going to be ignored by most people. I think anything as substantial as a change to the actual law, we should be notified at the very least. I'm surprised that I'm just hearing about this now. I'm surprised it was identified in only a footnote in a document. I haven't read it, so I can't speak to the merits of this, but the process by which I'm learning about this is a bit frustrating.
I absolutely hear your frustration. The complexity of this overall undertaking is huge. This was also discussed in the INV workshop that occurred on January 25th, just as another avenue that this information is made public. But Pike and everybody, I absolutely hear you. This is so much to keep up with, even as someone whose full-time job is to keep up with everything. I understand the challenge, so I appreciate that comment. Is there any further conversation on this point? I don't want to cut it off. I think this is a useful conversation if the members would like to continue it. Jen, please.
I guess I would reiterate what a few people have said as to why it matters for not just our committee, but for equity in general. The idea of public feedback and the idea of making the process transparent. Because again, if we're having trouble being on the committee and basically having the document sent to us, I think it has to be very clear that you're going to have much more buy-in from the general public, the more transparent it can be. And in easy language to understand, so that things that come up or change, if they're done in a way that's easily accessible for people that are not just following it as intently as we are, I think it generally helps move the process along.
I'm not sure where we are really on the draft agenda, so I don't know how much we should speak to or discuss S306 at this moment, but I just want to put it out there that if indeed that bill determines if there's going to be one or multiple designated delivery agents, I think it's premature for anyone to make that decision before, well, at this time.
Mm-hmm.
And I know my comment might be way out there and off target right now because I don't think this is on the agenda, but I just wanted to state that.
Hearing the interest in this topic, is there something we'd want to add to a future agenda? Is this something we would want to add for further discussion later on this agenda? I will note that our last meeting, the group had a conversation around concerns related to procedural equity as raised by some participants in the cases. My question for the group is, would anyone like to add this topic anywhere in this or a future agenda?
I'd like a chance to read the bill first before I discuss it.
Okay. I will make a note for a future meeting. If anyone would like to make it into a motion to add a little more weight to it, you would be welcome to, but also I can add it as a future agenda topic.
Dominic, if we do a motion or just an informal addition, could you ask the PUC to publicly comment on if they had a position on this or if they were the ones who originated that? I know that's tricky, but to the extent that that's permissible, I'd like to hear directly from the commission.
Okay. Public statement on position. This is just speaking from my own personal experience, having been at the commission for just about a year. The commission does usually not make statements on legislation, but I will make note.
Right, I understand. I think it would. I don't know how. Maybe this is independent work that we do as members, but like I think Matt Coda's point is important. Who originated this? Where did this come from?
Absolutely made note of. I appreciate the concern and the focus on this, what I believe to be an important topic. Okay. We are just about a half hour in. We'll try to take a break about an hour in, given that this is a 2-hour meeting, but I would like to move on to our next subpoint, 3 facilitators. So in public comments as well as in conversation with this group and the technical advisory group, it was heard loud and clear that the groups wanted some more support and direction and could use some help in facilitation. For those, as we discussed at our last meeting, and for those who have been following the TAG procedures or proceedings, we have been working with the U.S. Climate Alliance through a funding pot that they have for technical assistance for basically decarbonization across the country. And through that collaboration, we are bringing in the Consensus Building Institute, who has experience working in Vermont, to help facilitate these two advisory groups. As you've likely noticed on the call, Ashira Pelt is here with us, a senior associate with CBI. She has over 10 years of experience in public and private settings, has designed convenings internationally with specific expertise in international development, gender empowerment, social policies, land rights, DEI, and justice processes. So I would like to take a moment for Ashira to further introduce herself, and Ashira will be the facilitator for the Equity Advisory Group.
Thank you so much, Dominic. That was a wonderful introduction, and it's great to meet all of you. Like Dominic said, my name is Ashira. I'm part of the Consensus Building Institute. I have been there since October, and while I was there, I was doing a lot of climate-related facilitations and equity groups. So I've worked in Massachusetts on their resilience planning. I've been part of the New Jersey environmental facilitations and with the EPA with some of their community advisory groups. Very excited to be working with you. What the EAG is working on right now is very in line with what I do, which is building equity processes. Very excited to work hand in hand with all of you. I know that you are also experts in equity, especially in Vermont. And I am excited to work with the chairs once you elect them and work with the PUC and continue on the great work that Dominic has been doing. So just very excited to be working with you. We'll be reaching out very soon once you have your chairs and vice chairs all in line. Yeah, and today I'll mostly be observing, but feel free to reach out to me if you have any questions about the structure or what kind of support I can lend. So yes, just very excited.
Welcome, Ashira. It's great. Thank you for the introduction.
Yes, thank you for being here, and thank you in advance for all the work that you'll do with this group. Are there any questions that anyone has for Ashira at the moment? Wonderful. Well, hearing none, everyone will get the chance to get to know Ashira a little better as she does her startup work, and very looking forward to her leading in the future. Wonderful. The next item we have up under point 4 of the agenda is consultants. It is a big day of introducing people outside the PUC who will be working on the clean heat standard. So obviously you've met Ashira. Her colleague Catherine will be working with the technical advisory group. We have also finalized the contracts with Vermont Partnership for Fairness and Diversity, who is the public engagement facilitator called for in Act 18. In the footnote of the agenda, there are links to both the public engagement facilitator as well as the emissions analysis consultant, who is Opinion Dynamics, a experienced firm, I believe, out of Massachusetts. And in the footnote, you can also see their business and their RFP and statement of work. Are there any questions about either of the two consultants that are finally now on board? All right. Hearing none, I just wanted to give a quick update on the technical advisory group. They met this past Friday, the 16th. For those who are also part of the group, you were there, but to not belabor the point too much, but make sure that the two groups are on the same page. First and foremost, the message was communicated At this group's last meeting, we put together a statement communicating the importance of the 7 principles articulated in the Austin Climate Action Plan, with the addition of the 8th principle of availability after our discussion with Matt Smith last meeting. It was communicated, it was heard. Emily Roscoe was very helpful in providing a bit more color to the statement. And I think, please, Emily or Matt or any of the department people, tell me if you have additional opinions, but it was well received. Great. Pike?
Yeah, the notice went out so quickly, I didn't have a chance to attend the TAG meeting on Friday. And from the previous TAG, the meeting before, I submitted some comments which now are in paper form, print form, for the Equity Advisory Group. But I was wondering if you or maybe Matt or Emily could just summarize any additional work, if any, the TAG did with regards to emissions factors and such. Was there additional comment or discussion about the GREET model, for example?
Is Emily here? I don't see her. So I was at the TAG meeting. I am on the TAG. I don't remember there being, other than recognizing that we need to sort out subcommittees to address a whole bunch of different topics. And one of them was how we model greenhouse gas reductions. But someone else might have better notes than I do.
I'm here, Matt. Just wanted to say that all sounds correct to me.
Thank you.
Wonderful. Yeah, the majority of the time was spent understanding the scope of work, approach to work, and how the group wants to complete that work. A little less on the substantive side this meeting, which I think they'll get quite right back to because there's a lot on the plate. Speaking of finding ways to prioritize important work, officers and roles is the next piece on our agenda. Does anyone have anything else they'd like to speak more about before we move on to that? Pike, please go ahead.
I was raising my hand for the next item.
Oh, okay. All right. Is there anything else before we move on to item 5, officers and roles? Great. Right before I invite Pike to speak, I'll say we're going to try to move through this item and then take a 5-minute break and then get right back on, if that works for everybody. Cool. Alrighty. Point 5, officers and roles. Pike, you'd like to speak?
Yeah, last week I self-nominated for chair. I'd like to withdraw that nomination and nominate Mia Watson for chair.
Thanks, Pike. Yeah, I'd be happy to accept that nomination. I had initially not put my name forward just because I wasn't sure about bandwidth with my day job at Vermont Housing Finance Agency, but having spoken with leadership, we're very committed to, trying to provide structure and support for this working group. So I'd be happy to take on that role as chair. And if selected, I'm looking forward to hearing all of your concerns and suggestions about how to keep this work moving forward. Thanks.
I would second Pike's motion.
Yeah, I would also support you as chair. I think that would be great.
While sorry, Emily. Pike made a motion and Matt seconded to nominate Mia Watson for chair of the EAG. It seems like the best way to move forward is going to be dealing with these positions one at a time, given Mia's willingness. And Mia, thank you so much. Is there any discussion on Mia's possible election to chair of this group? Emily?
Just supporting and grateful for Mia's willingness.
Thanks.
Is there any other discussion? Hearing none, the presiding officer, all those in favor of Mia Watson being the chair of the Equity Advisory Group, please raise your hand using the function or on screen. All those opposed? In the opinion of the presiding officer, the ayes have it, and Mia Watson is elected chair at 1:18 p.m. by voice vote. Wonderful. Thank you so much, Mia. Alrighty, we do have a second leadership position, the vice chair, who is primarily tasked with working with the chair to prepare the agenda, and they would also be expected to review minutes for any possible changes. It is also generally anticipated that they would work with the chair and Ashira as consultant and PUC staff as necessary, led by the chair, to do any of the coordination that needs to happen for to put this group going. Chris?
Hi. I look forward to the opportunity to serve as vice chair for this committee. For those who don't know me, I work at the Vermont State Housing Authority, and I'm here representing low and moderate income renter and homeowner households. I'm also the chair of the Affordable Housing Committee in South Burlington. It's a great group, and would be willing to offer assistance to our new chair, Mia Watson.
I hear Chris's statement as a nomination of Chris Trombley for vice chair. Is there a second?
I would second Chris Trombley, vice chair.
Alrighty, there is a second heard. Is there any discussion on this point or any other nominations? Hearing no discussion, all those in favor for Chris Trombley to serve as vice chair of the Equity Advisory Group, please raise your hand using the raise hand function or on screen. All those opposed? In the opinion of the presiding officer, the ayes have it. Congratulations to Mia and Chris as chair and vice chair of this group. Thank you so much for both for stepping up. Wonderful. We are at 1:21. I believe this will be a good spot to take a quick break. Before we do, I'll just note that Mia and Chris's leadership will commence at the adjournment of this meeting, and commission staff and CBI will be in contact. Alrighty, without any objection, we will take a 5-minute recess. Let's be back by 1:27 Eastern. Alrighty, as people get back, please just either hit the raise hand or flash your screen, just so I know we are back up to quorum to resume the meeting. With that, we are back up. Alrighty, it is 1:27, and we have reconvened. 1:27. The next item on our agenda is item 6, prioritizing and sequencing of duties. This is one of the items that we identified to solicit public comments on before the discussion was up. In the agenda, there were footnotes for what the statutorily outlined items are for the Equity Advisory Group. I was hoping for this to be an opportunity for this group to, if people are ready, start to put some of these things on a calendar and sequencing timelines. If we are not ready to do that today, especially that we've just gotten leadership, it might be something that them and their agenda setting prerogative might have some more ideas about. It would also be a good opportunity for this group to give feedback on a 2220-rule schedule that the commission is working to get into a final form soon. So just as a way to prep conversation, I am going to drop the duties of the Equity Advisory Group as was contemplated in the most recent draft procedure into the chat. They can also be found in 30 VSA 8129A and Section 6K of Act 18 of 2023. I'll give people a moment to digest this. And begin generally with asking the question, are there any of these duties that can be acted upon in the immediate future? And if so, are there any administrative structures that this group needs to make it happen? I say that as the technical advisory group made some progress on identifying subgroups and people who would work on specific issues within those subgroups.
I guess clarifying question is, Dominic, is the intent that the item that you put in the chat here for each sub item below, 1, 2, 3, is that we have a work group for each, and that work group would then come with a recommendation, or what? I'm a little foggy on next steps here. I think you're on mute, sir.
Dominic, you're on mute.
Thank you. I got a whole way into that answer. My apologies. The reason I presented it this way is the technical advisory group went through each of their subtasks, and most of them had a deliverable or a special skill associated with them. They assigned them to different subgroups. I think that would be less directly appropriate for this group, and instead looking at these, they may be able to be grouped together to be seen as a subtask for a smaller group, or if the group looks at something like the report due at the end of this process, that could also prompt some sort of subgroup for drafting. So subgroups are just one of the things that can be used to tackle this work. I wanted to give it an example rather than a direction.
Thank you.
And just a point of clarification, Dominic, how many people in our group meeting together without running into public meeting issues?
Technically, if there's not a quorum, a meeting is not happening, and therefore open meeting laws do not apply. There's a specific piece in there. If any of these groups need to do something, beyond just think about, the way the procedures contemplated approach is the formation of a subgroup, but then there'd be a quorum within the subgroup, and whenever that is met, open meeting laws would apply. The good thing is we already have infrastructure in place for announcing and recording meetings, and therefore we do not believe it would be a high administrative burden to conduct a subgroup meeting.
That's helpful to know. So yeah, I think going forward, we just have to be aware that if we're going to do subgroup meetings, they're going to have to be substantially organized and planned ahead, so they can't be thrown together whenever it's kind of convenient for members of the subgroup. So that's certainly worth thinking about. Certainly, I think a subgroup could be really helpful when we get into being able to start writing parts of the final report that's due in January. That seems like something that would be a lot more effective and wouldn't necessarily require full group participation, at least in the initial drafting. But I agree with Dominic. I don't think these things the sort of duties that are numbered here can really be disaggregated in a way that allows us to just farm out parts of those. I think we'll have to think about it in terms of something else. Looking at it, I think one thing that will be helpful for this group is when we do have the PUC's report, or I guess comments on which programs already exist. I think that will help us a lot to understand what's already out there and how what ways clean heat credits could be delivered on the benefit of households, and also where we might see gaps, which is number 4. So I think parts of that will be hard to make a ton of progress on until we have a good landscape for the the universe that we're working in.
Jen?
I think too, just looking at small I, the first part, providing feedback, I believe that gets to what we were talking about earlier, so that we do have a duty, or we are charged with looking at the whole process as far as equity and how the public has access to these meetings, to knowing what's going on, and also just the time frame that might be incumbent on us to weigh in on whether it is equitable the way the time frame is now, and hearing concerns from groups like the PUC or other groups that feel like maybe more time will be needed.
Jeannie?
I guess just from a process perspective, how does the duties of the tag look like? I suppose it's analogous to the duties listed here. I wonder whether it's more technically defined, or is it defined, for example, let me pick on sub-bullet number 1. It talks about strategies for engaging Vermonters with low and moderate income. So what would be the tag analogous duty would look like?
So I am going to drop the tags in the chat as well. I don't know if there is a direct analog for that specific one.
Okay.
Because most of the tag responsibilities are a little more concrete, like establishing and revising clean heat credit value for different measures. There's going to be a number coming out of that, or a series of numbers.
I see. So I guess what I was trying to get at was, is there a logical way of connecting our specific duties to the tag deliverables, and that may determine the sequencing. So I just picked the number 1 as an example, but that may determine the sequencing of how these duties may look like. That's what I was trying to suggest.
Deirdre, I recall that there was a bit of a action point coming out of TAG on this subject. Basically, they wanted to come back to their group with critical schedule points that they think they would need to meet. Can you give a little bit of an overview of what they did there, just to see if this group might be interested and able in doing something similar?
Sure. So they also kind of looked at how to put together their tasks, how to sequence their tasks. And they didn't, other members on the call who were there can also speak to this, but, we weren't able to get to a point where this is the month we're doing this, but it was more so grouping tasks. So, like something to do with credit ownership, something to do with emission. So they started to group the tasks, which might help with prioritizing and grouping your own tasks. And I think that once both groups are able to fit those pieces together, and particularly in the timeline we have left, the time that the groups have left to do substantive work, I think that's where we can start to see more overlap and opportunities for collaboration. So one thing that the facilitators are also going to help the groups do is coordinate across work, so that there isn't this siloed work going on. So I think it seems like the TAG is not quite there yet either with proposing a schedule, but they got closer by grouping what they have to do into a set of like 6 categories or so. And I could bring that up if it would be helpful. I just didn't have it in front of me.
Well, to add to that point, I mean, that summary is helpful, that they are beginning to think about grouping activities that go together or that make sense. For example, the request we made to the TAG out of the last meeting that highlighted the 7 or 8 different areas, maybe the definition of the clean heat standard or the credit, when they're doing that, maybe those criteria doesn't apply. But when they think about where those credits reside and who would be involved in transferring the credits, maybe at that point they need to be thinking about the implementation approach, and that would help emphasize whether their approach is catering to the low and middle income groups. So I'm just wondering at what point it would get their attention. So maybe this is just a dialogue that needs to go back and forth. But I'm kind of trying to put my arms around what would be the first deliverable that we would look at and say, yes, this makes sense, this doesn't make sense. And is that to be determined, or is that something that we will have visibility to pretty soon?
Thanks, Ben. That's exactly what I was just going to drop into the chat as well. So what Ben just dropped into the chat are their ideas of what subgroups could work on outside of the full group and start to produce work product for people to react to. And I think that is something that the equity advisory group could also start to react to. And there are obviously subgroups that have pretty serious equity considerations that would make sense for this group to prioritize, whether that be credit ownership or, I think they have a low and moderate income consideration subgroup, or that's a category of activity. So anyway, yes, I think that that's what will happen. There will be something to react to from each group, and the facilitators will start to think about how to communicate effectively across groups.
I will read out, just for the benefit of the recording, the item dropped in the chat by Ben that was mentioned was a listing of the potential work groups identified by TAG. There were 7 market scenarios: credit trading, 2 measure characterization, 3 credit values, specifically looking at early action credits, 4 emission schedule, 5 retirement schedule required amounts, 6 credit ownership, 7 reconciling life cycle emissions with inventory emissions. Just for the record. If anyone has something to add on any of these points thus far, that would be great. If not, I have another discrete point this group could consider before we may move on to our next agenda item. Pike, and then Jen.
Yeah, I dropped into chat the text from section 8129 and the 2 pieces that I think are prescriptive, the things that we need to work on. Some of the other items we need to react to what the PUC is doing, but items 3 and 4 sounds like it's our job to be proactive and identify actions needed and recommend any additional programs. I don't see any need to wait for TAG or the PUC or any other group in order to get that started.
My comment was just that I think the more we can, I like your term react, the more we're able to interact when there are choices, as opposed to just reacting when, like, if a working group is coming up with a few different ideas, it would be great to be able to interact at that point to say what might be more equitable than something else, rather than having the committee recommend something and then have us say whether it's equitable or not. I think the more we can interact along the process, the better it might be to make sure we're going in an equitable fashion.
Mia, I also see your hand is up.
Yep. Yeah, Jen, I agree with you. I think one way that might help us be, sort of react to things efficiently is I think it would be good for us to revisit our equity guidelines. And, I know we all agreed that we liked the Austin framework, and that's, I think it would be good if we could flesh out maybe at the next meeting, depending on time, what we think those mean, work on definitions, and decide if we want to accompany it with scoring criteria, so that when we're faced with a decision, we have some framework to evaluate it. And I don't think we're quite there yet as a group, and I think that would be really helpful if we had more of a North Star to guide us, even if it, something we have to keep deepening as we go on. I think that would be helpful. And then I think another thing that would be good to do earlier rather than later, I don't think it's necessarily a subgroup, but task 1 is to provide feedback to the commission on strategies for engaging Vermonters in the public process. That's something they already have someone working on. So I think that would be good for our group, either this meeting to start discuss it, or come to the next meeting with suggestions on things that facilitator should be doing if they're not already planning to.
I would like to second Mia's last point there. I do see that first point, providing feedback to the Commission on strategies for engaging Vermonters with low income and moderate income in the public process for developing the Clean Heat Standard program. How to get the public involved. We did just onboard our public engagement facilitator. It is going to take him a minute, him and his organization, to spin up their wheels and really get their teeth into it. If this group has something they'd like to say proactively, now or the next meeting would be a great time to do that, so it can be well incorporated into the approach Curtis from the partnership has.
Would we have the opportunity to meet with the facilitator, find out or at least open questions? I don't know if the facilitator is familiar with Vermont, or a chance to have a conversation about what we've seen that works better, or ways that maybe we could help that person set up a good approach.
Absolutely. There will be opportunities for collaboration between this group and that facilitator. Curtis, what is Curtis's last name, Deirdre? It's slipping my mind at the moment.
It's Reed. Curtis
Curtis
Reed.
Reed, yes. Has been in Vermont, if I remember his introduction correctly, for 25 plus years, and is well connected to various groups in the state through his work for the Partnership for Equity and Diversity. Might I hear it as a suggestion, Jen and Mia, to try to get him to come to attend, possibly the next meeting or an upcoming meeting?
Yeah, if that needs to be a motion, yes, I'd make that motion.
I would
I don't
second
think it
that.
needs to be a motion.
Okay.
Oh, alrighty, we got a motion. Alrighty, Mia has motioned and Jen has seconded to request the facilitator attend a soon upcoming tag meeting. Any discussion on the motion?
That's to attend a tag meeting or a EAG?
Thank you for the clarification. I just misspoke. An EAG meeting.
Okay. Yeah, I support that. I think that'd be great.
Alrighty. I guess we'll take a quick vote on this and dispose with the issue at hand. All in favor, please raise your hand either on screen or using the option. All oppose? The opinion of the presiding officer, the ayes have it. 1:49 p.m. We will work with Curtis. Okay.
Dominic, if he's not able to come next time, I think it would be good if we put this on the agenda just so we don't this isn't another situation where we're playing catch up and we have some feedback starting to roll for this group.
And that agenda item would be addressing point 2AI in the draft procedures, providing feedback to the Commission on strategies for engaging Vermonters.
Yes, yeah, starting to brainstorm, strategies and things that the facilitator should be looking for. I don't want them to get too far into their work without the EAG giving them an opportunity to give feedback.
Absolutely. And whether or not Curtis is able to make it to the next meeting, I guess I'll just ask the group, do you feel it'd be appropriate for group members to come to that meeting prepared with some ideas on how it would be important to reach the segments of Vermont that you usually work with?
So yeah, before folks answer that question, which I think is part of item 3 in the statute, identifying actions needed to provide customers with low and moderate income with better services to mitigate the fuel price impacts calculated in section A1 and 2. I think identifying not just items for number 1, but items for number 3 as well.
Yeah, I think you can pretty much lump those two together. They're one and the same in a lot of ways. So yeah, that makes sense to me. Do some brainstorming and then bring it back to the group.
It is noted as an agenda item, and the commission staff, as well as Ashira and CBI, will work with our newly elected chair and vice chair to make sure it is appropriately captured on the agenda for the next meeting. Before we move on from this point, is there anything else a group member would like to say before we open up to the public? Alrighty, if any members of the public would like to share their thoughts on the prioritization and sequencing of the Equity Advisory Group's duties, please go ahead now. Given that there are only 3 people on this call who are not otherwise affiliated with the group, if Dylan, Stephanie, or Stephanie have nothing to comment, we will go ahead and move on to the next agenda item. All right. Next agenda item is benchmarking systems to evaluate the clean heat standard elements. The background on this are some documents that Srini sent a couple weeks ago that have been considered once before. I think this also well ties into the comment Mia made just a couple minutes ago on having criteria that this group will want to look at things that come forward in the future in the interactive and reactive sense that Jen was talking about. And I will open it up to the group. Benchmarking systems to evaluate clean heat standard elements.
I think we may have started a list of those elements last time we met. And I think those are the elements, Dominic, that you presented to the tag.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think we had the 7, I guess they're referred to as objectives from Austin, Texas model there. Then we added one with for availability with a kind of a geographic context attached to it. Yeah. Oh, perfect. Yeah, Dominic, just put them up on the
So
chat.
how do we add benchmarks to those is the question. One way to add benchmarks is to cite outside sources for potential impacts. I'm thinking of, specifically for health and, American Medical Association citing their sources, benchmark impacts.
I like what Mia said too about coming up with definitions. So taking each of those objectives and defining how they apply specifically to clean heat or to that type of a transition.
Jeff and then Srini, both your hands up.
Sure. So this is Jeff. I work in low-income weatherization, and I've missed the last meeting, so I may be way off base, and I apologize. But what about contractor capacity? Like, that's going to have a huge impact on things that roll out and are required. But we're seeing huge capacity at the contractor and even our agency capacity now. I don't know if it's not applicable, please ignore till a later date when it becomes applicable. It's a huge concern of mine.
I think that could go under availability if we got rid of the geographic part and did geographic as a sort of subcategory, along with, contractors to, implement the measures.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. The contractor availability issue is a similar issue that we heard from the public participant at the last meeting about the grid availability for some of these people who are off the grid. So, I guess what I was going to say initially was, what do we do with these objectives, right? The Austin framework already has got a baseline definition of these objectives, and it also suggests a process. I don't know how many of you can look at slide 27. 27 is the multi-step process recommended for the advisory groups. I guess one approach would be to get a baseline. To me, step 1 and step 2 should tell us the background of the disadvantaged group or the low income or the middle income groups. How would we go about establishing the baseline data or feedback or concerns from a wider population? I'm not really sure. I think somebody, maybe it was Jen who suggested this at the last meeting, is, she has access to, through her organization, she has access to community groups that would fit the profile of what we are trying to address here. There may be a way to engage and get feedback. So to me, step 1 and 2 are collecting baseline data or kind of assessing the landscape that is in front of us. So I would think that there would be a benefit in doing that exercise broadly for the clean heat standard.
Srini, you say doing that exercise. How do you imagine those considerations would be worked through in the context of this group?
Well, I'm thinking about how do we get access to the voices of the customer here? The voices of the customer are not all in this group. The voices of the group of the customers are out in the community. So we have to start making some connections to the community to think about what specifically we can identify with some of these issues. For example, we heard from one person last month about, there are communities in Vermont that are remotely located that have no access to the grid, and how would the clean heat standard address that? So maybe there is pockets of population that cannot be well served. So I just wonder, how objectively can you go and assess the landscape? Instead of just saying that, 30% of the population fit in the low and middle income group, I think you have to define equity through these 7 or 8 different lenses, right?
Jen, and people, please feel free to jump in as the conversation flows.
Yeah, I agree. I like that approach of identifying places where we can get that kind of a baseline from actual conversations or narratives. And I think, Jeff, probably through weatherization, you have that type of information. I know the weatherization department at CVOEO, Champlain Valley, was able to give me some information about who was served, who's on their waiting list. That kind of information can give us a baseline of who is seeking things like weatherization, who is, still waiting for it. So I think there are organizations where we can start to identify them and get some more information. And I'm not sure what the spreadsheet is going to look like, where you're gathering what services are out there, but I think part of it was who had been served, so that if that information comes into, like through Efficiency Vermont, any place where low and moderate income people are identified and how they've been served so far or where the services are lacking, I think could be helpful with a baseline.
Jen, can you expand a little bit on what you mean by customers who have been served?
Well, in the weatherization program, the customers that have gotten weatherization for their homes or who have gotten heating systems replaced or upgraded to be energy efficient, those records are housed within the weatherization departments. And you can correct me too, Jeff, on this. So that's a place to start to see, up to this point in the past several years, how many people have been served, how many people are waiting to be served.
And maybe that's something like a running list of like information we'd like to have, and we can determine if that's something where we would be able to source some of that as ourselves as members, or else ask someone to attend our meeting and speak. Like, I know that the Public Service Department has a lot of experts in some of these relevant areas, or community groups, like you mentioned. So maybe that's trying to find an organized system for keeping track of some of these issues we've identified and want to learn more about.
Srini,
Yeah, I think
I
that
see your
makes
hand
sense.
up.
Yeah, so I think Mia's kind of suggested what I was going to say. I think we need to maybe develop a framework or a structure for the type of data that we are looking for, to define steps 1 and 2. And then what Jen was describing was there is already an existing set of data or database through Efficiency Vermont or through CVO, EEO, or other organizations that could be synthesized to match what we are defining as a framework, without compromising, any personal or individual data. The framework could be matched with existing database to identify that or develop that landscape.
Emily?
Yeah, I guess just in terms of process, there are staff at Efficiency Vermont that holds information that I don't, to answer some of these questions. So I think I'm just noting that it's most helpful for if there are specific asks of Efficiency Vermont related to weatherization programs and equity, for that to be either part of the agenda or in a meeting, so that I can bring the appropriate staff person. But we'd be happy to pull in who has that information and expertise when appropriate. I think just noting some advance notice is really helpful for me to bring in that information and the experts that exist at Efficiency Vermont.
I'd really like to see us go back to this Austin framework. I think it's really powerful that it provides, a theme, a definition, and like aspects of that to look at. But if you look at the actual text, there's a lot of stuff that's just like not relevant, like, access to healthy foods, which is not really going to be a clean heat standard thing, although I can see why Austin includes it in their stuff. So I'd love for us to kind of go through the document and redline and fix definitions, just because I think if we believe in this framework and we want to use it, we should really make sure it serves our purposes and is clear. I'd be happy to go through, with making sure I do it the right way with staff members, creating a basic framework and taking a stab at getting rid of items or redlining items that I don't think are relevant. And then maybe in the next meeting, we could go through and get on the same page about some of these definitions. Is that something that the groups would see as productive?
I was going to recommend similar, and that was just that we all have a homework assignment to go through this rubric beginning on in our agenda items from 29 through whatever 35. So yeah, Mia, if you and your staff are willing to do it, I think that would be great. I think others of us should maybe take a stab at it as well.
Yeah. So I guess I like that idea, Mia, but I'm just wondering, I don't consider myself as a expert in any way to look at how an electrification project impacts a specific subset of the community from the aspects of health, um, affordability, accessibility, etc. So I just wonder whether there needs to be a combination of someone like yourself who can do a high level screening and say that these do not apply to the Clean Heat Standard initiative, just as a high level scrub initially, and then maybe make it more specific to what we are trying to do with the Clean Heat Standard and make sure that the questions that are appropriate questions that are relevant and that should come from maybe experts in the field, like someone like Jeff or someone who's closer to how these programs have been rolled out through Efficiency Vermont or other organizations. So there needs to be some more color, I think, applied to this from the point of view of Clean Heat Standard, apart from the initial scrubbing.
I agree. I just think if we're on firm footing about our values, then we can kind of start to untangle how the values should be applied to individual questions we have. So that's why I was proposing open to it, like a getting really clear about what we think the values are and what the meaning of those values are, starting to develop a list of issues and questions we have, and then, sort of putting that together to comment on sort of policies as they come in front of us. That's kind of the best way I see is to at least get started on this work. I do think we're going to have to tackle, individual issues like you mentioned, but I'm kind of hoping that the framework in terms of our values and the information that all of the members of the EAG have will guide us in that work. It's just such a huge task.
The Austin framework is nice in that it is designed around questions. So we don't need to have the answers right now. We just need to develop the questions. So we don't need to be experts as long as we are, roughly understanding what questions need to be asked. So Mia, I think, yes, go ahead and start working with this Austin framework. I don't think over the last 2 weeks anyone has had any real opposition to it.
I am hearing 2 items that the group seems interested in pursuing out of this discussion. The first, I think, has been clearly communicated, that Mia is going to take a look at the Austin objectives and do an initial edit on making them applicable to Vermont and the work we're doing as part of the Clean Heat Standard program design process. The second one is creating a list of information that the group wants to use to answer the questions that are prompted by this values proposition, I'll call it for the moment, and where to get that data. Are there any concrete steps that the group would like to take in that direction in addition to Mia redlining the Austin objectives?
So I intend to go through the Austin objectives also, and I'll get those over to Mia, but I encourage other people to do that as well.
Yeah, I'll do the same. I think that's a great place to start. Like you said, Mia, if we have a firm footing on, what our objectives are, then we can, jump off from there. But
Yeah.
I did have one kind of broader question about data. I mean, there's a lot of data out there, and if we do have access to that data to help, answer some questions on our objectives, I mean, who's going to go through all that? Are we going to do that as that's probably going to need to be a subcommittee to do that? I mean, that's going to be a pretty heavy lift. And are we kind of generally looking at the data to see what trends are? Probably more so that than to, really start analyzing the data in full. I mean, this gets back to the discussion about timeline. I mean, I think the timeline especially for like the DDA process, like we were talking about there, it seems to be way too quick for us to be able to accurately assess equity, like we're talking about here. So just kind of, that was my thought process on that. I mean, it's a lot to be done, not enough time, probably. And I guess to Matt's point earlier in the discussion, is that something that, do we want to come out and, make a statement about that, equity wise? Because it's like, we can make all these plans to do it, but if we don't have enough time to do it, then, kind of, where does that leave us? But yeah, redlining the objective sounds great to start.
Okay, so I hear one concrete task coming out of this section. I did not hear a second related to data collection and organization. If maybe as members are thinking about that, now would be a good time to open this section up to public comment, noting we've got about 15 minutes left in the meeting. So without objection, any members of the public wishing to speak on the topic of benchmarking systems to evaluate clean heat standard elements or anything else we talked about in this section, please go ahead and unmute and do so now. Hearing nothing from our members of the public, I'll ask members of the group if there is anything else that we'd like to talk about under this bullet point before we look at the rest of what our agenda holds.
This is Jeff. Dominic, as you know, I was contacted by a member of the public who was last week frustrated that they weren't able to provide opinion or even access the meeting, that it was confusing when they were they also had a day job, that they couldn't take time off. I think the info you provided me was really good, so I just wanted to share that there are people of the public who are frustrated, like some of the people here are at the rate. She also commented that things are moving really fast without time to comment from the public. So I just wanted to share that I have been contacted, and she was a previous weatherization client, but that's all I wanted to share.
Much appreciated, Jeff. Okay, so we have 15 minutes left in the scheduled meeting time. There are 2 items left on the agenda: credit ownership considerations and GREET model. I think GREET model concerns would be an accurate way to portray this section. I could give a 5-minute overview on where the commission is on ownership questions. I don't think we have time to discuss it now. And Pike, I would look to you on time considerations of a GREET conversation.
Yeah, I don't think today is the time to discuss that. It came up a couple of weeks ago in the technical advisory group, and I wanted to get some ideas down. But if TAG isn't pursuing it, and it didn't sound like they did the last time, there's no need for us to discuss it at this point. Although I hope people read what I wrote.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I'll give a quick overview of credit ownership considerations and where that process is at. If we have time for some quick conversation, that'd be great. And if not, we can adjourn knowing that we will have a full agenda next meeting. So a brief overview on credit ownership considerations. I think the most important thing to say on this is I see it, and I believe commission staff see this as a fundamental question in this entire design process, where who owns credits initially upon their minting will have huge implications on how other parts of this entire system work. We have had some fairly robust public process on this topic to this point. We have had a comment period that ended, I think, early December. We had a workshop on it mid-December, and then we had reply comments on it due late last month, maybe mid last month. The general universe of ideas, and I do not mean this list to be exhaustive of all possibilities, but these are the things that have been mentioned the most in the public comments thus far. On one end, individual homeowners, basically anyone who owns a building that has a clean heat measure installed on it, would be the initial owner, all the way up to a more abstract model of having proportional credits awarded based on how it was financially paid for. There are models all along the track in between those 2 points, including a but-for consideration that asks what intervention created or prompted the installment of the measure. There have been ideas of having purely financial distribution, a combination of financial and other market-based interventions. There is an approach of having the deliverer or the installer be the primary owner. The commission is currently working to get a straw proposal that was requested explicitly by TAG as part of the work that they are statutorily required to do to be consulted on ownership structures. The commission's aim is to have a fairly complete straw proposal for TAG's consideration at their next meeting. This would also be something that we would bring to the equity advisory group's consideration. But it is not done right now. We hope to have it done soon. This is we understand a very important question, and we are doing our best to look at it from every angle and find as many win-win-wins as we can. What's going to work best for this design. Does anyone have any questions or comments on ownership structures at the moment?
I have a comment or an opinion, which is that I think to begin with, initially, the credit should belong or be owned by the property owner. Understanding that it's transferable, and if there's some grant money that created that credit from an organization or a nonprofit, or that installer installed something, there's going to be a contract between the property owner and those organizations, and the credit can be transferred as appropriate. But I think initially it should begin and rest with the property owner.
Heard. Thank you, Pike. Matt?
Dominic, could I just want to make sure I understood what you said. So the PUC is going to all those different, from all the different credit ownership structures. The PUC is going to come to the TAG and to the EAG and propose the range of items, and then we're going to ask for comments, or are they going to come up with a specific structure of ownership and request for comments? In other words, are they going to show us the buffet and ask us our opinion of it, or are they going to show you what they're thinking and ask us our opinion of it?
Our aim is going to be as specific as possible, so that our goal is to come with one answer. We already know that this topic is too complex for a simple single answer, so we're going to come with our best answer, the considerations that brought us to that point. And then we will ask TAG and this group to say, okay, you thought about this the right way, you missed it here. Here's where we can tweak it to be a little better. But we're going to try to come back with one primary answer.
And if a quick follow-up, if I could, it will address different, because obviously there's installed measures, there's energy products, there's energy services, there's delivered energy products. So it's going to address the range of clean heat measures, not just, yeah.
Yes, the level of thoroughness in how each of the different types of clean heat measures will not every possible clean heat measure, or
Sure.
not every clean heat measure contemplated by the legislation will be addressed to the same level of thoroughness. That is just a time and probability constraint, but we are going to do our best for whatever structure we come in place to be evenly applied to all different kinds of clean heat measures.
Okay, thank you.
I see Emily, then Mia, then Srini's hands.
Thank you. I guess I'm just curious if it's possible, will you be presenting this at the TAG meeting or the EAG meeting, or is it possible to maybe have like that document to review ahead of those meetings, so that we're not, I think, reacting in the moment? We have time to prepare a reaction or digest it.
Ideally, we would provide you with the document well ahead of time to circulate. When is the next TAG meeting, Emily or Deirdre? Do you know?
Off the top of my head, I don't have it. Sorry, Deirdre, go ahead.
No, it's good. March 7th, so 2 weeks from Thursday.
Okay. Given the internal PUC processes for documents of this importance, we might not get it out to you as far in advance as we would like for such thorough consideration, but we will make every single effort to give everybody time to read it before you're asked to get on the call.
Thank you very much.
Next, I see Mia's hand.
Yeah, apologies if this was part of the credit discussion that I haven't heard, but you didn't mention financing and the role of lenders in that ecosystem. You mentioned installers, homeowners, but how to activate financing options for installing measures to support grants and things like that. I don't know if that's been part of the discussion that I haven't heard.
From my recollection of the conversations that have been had, the closest we've hewed to those specific concerns are looking at an ownership structure that depends on sources of financing as the primary tool we use to divvy up a credit. I don't think the concern you brought up has been deeply addressed in the conversation, so I appreciate it as a topic for us to consider as we polish this thing, and also as a topic for you to bring your perspective on as we converse about it with the advisory groups.
Yeah, I guess, Dominic, thanks for the summary. I guess I don't have a sense for how wide the preferences are in or the point of view is about where the clean heat credit standard should reside. Something to add to what already I think Pike mentioned earlier is clean heat standard is about reducing greenhouse gas emissions. Greenhouse gas emissions is specific to a point of source where there is an equipment or an apparatus generates the greenhouse gas emissions. So in a very simple definition, it resides at the point of operation, where the owner is today, the house owner or the, whatever property owner is there today. So I couldn't, from all the workshops we have had and all the comments we have had, I don't quite have a sense for, how broad the input is today. So I guess we have to wait and see. But so is there even a fundamental disagreement about, the credits, are directly associated to the source of emission of the greenhouse gases?
To answer that specific question, yes, there has been substantial disagreement on where credit ownership should initially lie.
Okay.
Is there conversation or disagreement among this group?
I think it's just
Mia and then
complicated.
Matt.
Like, for instance, oh, sorry. So I think it's just complicated. Like, for instance, the state weatherization program that Jeff runs and that CVOEO participates in, they do entirely state-funded work that the homeowner doesn't pay for at all. So, I think there's a question there. If someone else isn't paying for, the entirety of a project to say weatherize a home, maybe in that case, maybe not that it belongs to the homeowner. I think that's an open question. In other projects, you'll get a whole variety of incentives from different organizations, in terms of grants and sometimes loans and other, financing in order to a project. So I think when you get all these different sources coming in, it could get really complicated to decide who gets what. I mean, I agree with you from an equity standpoint, centering homeowners, especially low-income homeowners, makes sense. I just think it's really messy really quickly, and that's why you'll hear lots of different proposals from different people.
And to tag on to that, the different measures, I think it'll be challenging to establish one size fits all depending on the measure. So whether it's a delivered energy product, a sustainable biofuel, whether it's just a piece of equipment installed by an electrician or by a heating technician, or whether it is like a financing thing or something that is inspired by rebates or incentives. I just think the consumer owns it. I think it will be challenging to operate a clean heat standard in which someone will have to be aggregating these credits from potentially tens of thousands of homeowners versus the obligated entities or the credit generators. But I mean, I'm open to it. I would need to think through all the different possibilities.
Yeah, Mia, to answer your concern, or to let you know how I'm thinking about it. So every time that weatherization program it happens, there's contracts and documents the homeowner signs. If the weatherization program believes it deserves that credit, part of those contracts will say, homeowner, you assign us so-and-so this many credits or these credits based on the weatherization program we start. We fund. So I think they can be assigned, but I think there just needs to be a clear initial step. And it seems, at least to me, logical that it would rest at the home.
Yeah.
And then be assigned from there.
Yeah.
Is there a document that explains what it means to own the credit? Like, what is that going to do for anybody? I'm behind the times, and I'd like to get caught up to speed on what that's going to provide.
So the heating and cooling contractors, Jeff, have created a credit ownership form, and we created one. They created one back in July of last year, and then the PUC issued more specificity in what they want in terms of obtaining early action credits, and the form was adjusted. Happy to share it with you.
Sure.
Which essentially it's not a legal document, but is some attempt to establish ownership of clean heat credits, which can be signed off on by either different suppliers or the consumer themselves. And that may not hold up. It may be absolutely worthless, especially if the legislature decides all this work was for naught, that the clean heat standard should not be implemented. But if it is, it might be of value to whoever establishes ownership.
Yeah. And I'm sure at a future point we talk about that, but I would say in our program, the agencies or our office doesn't care about the credit. We want the credits to go to the low income person so that they get credit so they don't have to pay additional funds. But I'm sure there'll be
Yeah,
a time and a place for that discussion, I hope.
yeah. I mean, in a simplistic fashion, if you look at how carbon tax credit has been implemented all over the world, and how industries and households have benefited from doing energy improvement projects and energy reduction projects that eventually reduce the greenhouse gas emissions. It's a very simple idea. If you own a fuel oil based furnace, you're probably emitting 50 to 60 metric tons of CO2 emissions in a given year. At $100 a ton, that's worth about $5,000. So until those 50 or 60 tons is eliminated, that value of 5,000 tons is not created, and it resides at the point of operation. And whether the homeowner pays for part of it or gets paid completely with the equivalent of the $5,000, it's immaterial. At the end of the day, the credit doesn't get generated until the greenhouse gas emissions is eliminated. It's a very simple principle that the whole world has operated on based on carbon tax. So, I mean, I'm sure there's a lot of thought process behind this, but if I apply the 80-20 rule, I think Vermont should try to do what the rest of the world is trying to do, not define a process that fits, every little subsection of the population. So I would encourage the PUC to think about adopting some core principle of, a carbon tax, how a carbon tax is applied.
I appreciate this discussion. Jen, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to quickly agree, and I liked what you said originally about source. I think equity also calls for kind of a simplicity in approach, a transparent approach. I know weatherization tracks what they do for a home to that property, and I do worry that if it gets too complicated, people aren't able to see how it works. It's also an incentive. So if you give somebody the credit that's the owner, that incentivizes them to make those transitions.
I will interject only to say it is already past time. We're at 2:34, and I would like to give a moment for any members of the public to comment on this issue or anything. We are reaching the end of the conclusion. As we've seen that credit ownership is a complicated and complex topic, which will definitely be discussed by this group more in the future. I will also encourage group members and members of the public alike to take a look at the discussion that's happened in EPUC under the topic tag 3 credit creation. The public comment period specifically requesting comment on ownership if closed, but the commission staff does review comments made through the public comment filings on a continual basis. So if there's anything more you'd like to throw in to the record, that would be a good way to get it down in writing. With that, I see Dylan Giambatista's hand up for a member of the public to give some comment. So I'll call on you, Dylan.
Yeah, hello everyone. Dylan Giambattista with VGS Vermont Gas. Just want to share a quick comment. I know you're over time, but related to the conversation at the beginning of the agenda around the timeline for implementation and whether there's a role for the Equity Advisory Group to weigh in. Just would like to call attention to the fact that were there to be a change in schedule for implementation or development of Act 18 and the Clean Heat Standard or the default delivery agent, that as an obligated party, our perspective is we still have a Global Warming Solutions Act requirement in 2030. And if we think about this timeline, the obligation is January 1st of 2030. That means that we would really appreciate a framework in which we can plan to be compliant and reduce emissions in line with the Act. So Act 18, the Clean Heat Standard, provides that. And if the timeline is changed, it would have material impacts, we think, on obligated parties in the thermal sector trying to achieve compliance. So it's just something to consider, and I know everyone's weighing the details. There's a long way to go, but appreciate you hearing my comment.
Thank you very much. Are there any other members of the public who would like to speak? Alrighty, hearing none, I just want to give one more opportunity for members of the group. Anything that needs to be known as we head into our preparing for our next meeting? Alrighty, seeing none and considering we are at, oh, Srini, go ahead.
No, thank you. I was just going to say thank you. I was just going to sign off. Thank you.
Oh, yes, absolutely. Without objection, the being at 2:37, the meeting has adjourned. Any objection? Hearing none, the meeting has now adjourned. Thank you all for your time, and thank you to me and Chris for their leadership.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Take care.